Hello, sports fans. Welcome to Howard on Sports. My name is Howard, and tonight I want to talk about three can't miss Baseball Hall of Famers who missed. Talking about Dwight Gooden, Darryl Strawberry, and Don Mattingly. So I grew up in New York watching these players. Uh, I was and am a Yankee fan, but I've never rooted against the Mets. And so we'll start with Dwight Gooden because that was can't miss or must see TV, however you want to say it. Of course, I was more into the Yankees, but still, when Dwight Gooden started, I was watching many of those games. And he was just really fun to watch. He had a great fastball, but it was his curveball that he would set batters up with that fastball, and then he'd throw the curveball that he called it Lord Charles. And that curveball was devastating, and players, they didn't know what to do with it. And he was really good for 3 or 4 years. And then he had his issues with drugs, and it just all fell apart for him. He did come back with the Yankees and pitched a no-hitter in the 90s. But he's primarily known for pitching with the Mets. And 1985 was his best season. He was 24-4, I believe, with a 1.53 ERA. I'm pretty sure that that's correct. And yeah, he was just great. And he had Hall of Fame written all over him. And if he wouldn't have screwed up his career, if he wouldn't have gotten into drugs, I'm pretty sure he would have made the Hall of Fame. Now, he still statistically had a good career, nothing to be ashamed of, but he underachieved. He just should have done a lot better. So it is what it is. Darryl Strawberry, kind of a similar story. With the Mets, the thing with him was he had a beautiful swing. I talked about this in a previous video about how left-handers have beautiful swings. So his was one of the most beautiful I've ever seen. He had incredible power. From time to time, he would hit balls like 500 feet. He was like legendary. And during his good seasons, he hit for a pretty decent average. He had a really good arm in right field. And he was just a winning ball player. He had a lot of clutch moments. And then with the Yankees in the 90s, he had a lot of clutch moments with the Yankees. A lot of big home runs. And yeah, just a really good career. But the problem is between the time that he left the Mets and then went to the Yankees, he didn't do much for several years. He was on the Dodgers, did nothing with them. Then he was on the Giants, did nothing with them. Then by the time he came back as a Yankee, he was a good player, a very useful player, but he wasn't a superstar anymore. So it was the same thing as Dwight Gooden, drugs and other issues. He just couldn't keep it together long enough to have a Hall of Fame career. But he had a good career, though. Statistically, he did well. Definitely way above average, but not quite Hall of Fame. Now, Don Mattingly had a little different story than those other two guys. Don Mattingly didn't have an issue with drugs or anything like that. His body betrayed him. That was the issue. For the first 5 or 6 years of his career, I'd say he was the best player in baseball. I mean, he did some amazing things, including he hit, I believe it was 352. I didn't look it up. I think it was 352 he hit one year. Another year, he drove in 145 RBIs. Now, granted, he had Rickey Henderson as a leadoff hitter, so that helps because Henderson was on all the time. But nevertheless, Don Mattingly was a fantastic player. He had power. He hit for average. He was a great fielder. I mean, he didn't have speed. That's one thing he didn't have, but he pretty much had everything else. He finally played in the postseason when they started the wild card format, his last year, the Yankees made the playoffs as a wild card, and he hit over 400. The only time he ever made the playoffs, and he hit a home run at home, and the crowd went crazy. So Mattingly was really a great player, but it was his back. His back kept him from being a Hall of Famer. Because, like I said, his first 5 or 6 years, he was the best player in baseball. And then late in the 80s, early in the 90s, as the Yankees became a terrible team, he also, I don't want to say terrible, but he was a shell of his former self. He had no more power. He just became a mediocre ball player on a bad team. It was a sad thing to watch. But like I said, his final season, he did play decently and he played great in the playoffs. So at least he ended on a high note. And you look at his overall stats, they are good. They are borderline Hall of Fame, but and I'd love to see him get in, but he probably won't. But all three of those guys definitely had Hall of Fame talent. And if you had asked me in the mid 80s, I would say, oh, these are three of the best players I've ever seen. They're definitely going to make the Hall of Fame. But it didn't happen. So there are no guarantees. Meaning any player you're watching now that you think is like the best player you've ever seen, you don't know how it's going to end for them. Sometimes people self-destruct. Sometimes their bodies just don't last. Whatever it is, whatever the situation, there are no guarantees. So, and those three men are, sort of a warning sign to anyone. Like, don't take it for granted. You have to just hope. You have to work hard, and you have to have a bit of luck. And if you do those things and you have great talent, then hopefully you'll make the Hall of Fame. So anyway, anyone who's watching this video, have a great night.